we've all had been there where you're doing a gig, whatever the reason is, somebody's decided like, today I'm not going to show up. I'll be here, but I'm not showing up. And I always think that's a miss because you never know who's in the audience. You never know who's watching, but like whatever. And just to kind of attack every show, every opportunity to kind of do something for someone else, because it's not about you. Like at the end of the day, right? That's what's so cool about that approach. It's like, yeah, I can't even perform. I didn't come to perform for myself. I can't perform for other people. So why would I bring, regardless of what's wrong, why would I bring an attitude? And like, man, how many shows have you played where there's been something wrong? Like at least half of them, right?
This is All About the Song.
Welcome to the 124th episode of All About the Song. I am your host, Michael McDonnell, and thank you for joining us. On the podcast today, we have Thompson Egbo-Egbo, an incredible piano player and composer from Toronto, emigrated from Nigeria at 4 and started playing the piano at 6. Thompson recently, and I mean really recently, because it just came out, portrayed Oscar Petersen in a Canadian Heritage Minute. Now, if you're from Canada, I'm 33, so if you're old as I am, you've lived your life when you watch television seeing these Heritage Minutes. There are commercials that talked about various things in the world that maybe you didn't know were Canadian. It told a little quick story about it. I thought it was amazing that Thompson portrayed Oscar Petersen, such an important influence in the world's music sphere, let alone the fact that he was himself a Canadian. But I thought it was an incredible thing to have such a competent piano player portray him, even though Thompson's not performing in the actual commercial or anything. I just thought that it was a really cool nod to artistry. I'm really excited to bring you this conversation today because I met Thompson in 2019, it was at Hughes Room, which is unfortunately not around anymore, but it was this beautiful music place. I had never played there before. It's like a dinner and show type thing. So you go in and you have, a substantial meal, and then the band hits the stage and they perform, and there's this beautiful piano. And we got there, so this is Dr. Draw that I perform with, which is a phenomenal violin player that I've performed with on many occasions at this point. He is a very just fluid, artistic, wonderful person, and he has innate ability to put musicians together. And usually, sometimes you do a little bit of a rehearsal, but I was really great with Thompson as he showed up to the venue. We kind of did a quick run through. I realized that he was an absolutely incredible pianist, and we had dinner, and we got to know each other as fast as we could in a sense, and we just talked at the dinner table, and then it was like, okay, let's go and perform 90 minutes on stage, and it was absolutely incredible. Since then, I celebrated my birthday at the Rex because Thompson was performing a show, and I put together a show at the beginning of 2020 at Junction City Music Hall where the Egbo-Egbo Trio performed alongside Dr. Draw, and it was an incredible night. I think Thompson's a wonderful person. His musical experience has been something that is a little different than, having like a traditional rock band on in a sense, but the differences, I guess for me, the differences are not as drastic as I once thought them to be. And getting to know Thompson and the way he performs, it's been a unique and an incredible experience to vicariously learn about classical music and jazz music through him. I know that he has 3 albums that are available on Spotify, which is The Offering, A New Standard, which is my dad's favorite, and Short Stories. The Egbo-Egbo Trio is just absolutely fantastic, and I was really happy to talk and bring to you this conversation with Thompson Egbo-Egbo today. And now a quick word from our friends and sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Hailed, which is a coffee shop located at Yonge and Gerrard in the downtown Toronto area. If you are a coffee drinker, you must try Hailed. They are ranked consistently among the top 10 coffee houses in Toronto. Visit the store and support local Toronto-based businesses. Be sure to place your order at www.hailed.ca. This episode is also brought to you by Flickly. Thank you, Richard Atkin, friend of the podcast. We really appreciate your support for the Canadian music scene. Rich is the founder and CEO of Flickly, a premier video animation studio, working with large brands and enterprises across the globe. Learn more about Rich and his work at Flickly by going to the website flickly.com, FLIKLI.com, and connect with Richard Atkin on LinkedIn. So here we are, episode 124 with Thompson Egbo-Egbo. Thompson, thank you so much for being on the podcast this morning, and congratulations for being part of a History Canada Heritage moment. What was the experience like portraying Oscar Petersen?
You know what? It was actually really quick. Yeah, the thing was filmed over 2 days. I was asked. I'm still not even sure necessarily. I mean, I know some of the connections that I have to some of the, to the people involved, but the phone call kind of came out of the blue. And they're like, hey, yeah, can you come do, we need somebody to play Oscar Petersen. And, I guess, we think you look like him a little bit, or there's some resemblance. And so we'd love for you to kind of do it. So I was like, for me, I thought it was pretty cool. I actually didn't think much of it. I knew it was going to be a Heritage Minute, but I just kind of was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like, it's one of those things, you kind of do it. And then when it comes out, you're like, oh wow, yeah, you got to be a part of that. That's really cool.
What I loved about it was that, not only did they pick someone that, could similarly have looked like Oscar Petersen per se, but someone that knows how to play the piano at an elite level. I thought that was, something that was very important to it, even if it was just me alone knowing that you could actually perform some of these pieces. I thought that there was just like, and maybe it's from knowing you, there was like a little bit of a confidence when they showed you in the club, on the piano, the way you were playing. It didn't look like that was the first time you were doing it.
Yeah, what's funny? Because I've had a couple of friends like call and like obviously people congratulated. This thing was filmed, I don't want to say so long ago, but it was probably filmed about a year and a half ago. The bass player, now I'm forgetting his name, had reached out to me. He's like, hey, have you seen the commercial yet? And I was just like, no, I don't even know what's going on with it. So I'd almost kind of forgotten that I actually had even done it. And obviously, with COVID, it's like a different lifetime that has just happened to all of us, right? And it's just like this new thing. So it's easy to kind of, anything pre-COVID almost like feels like, lifetimes ago. I am so curious because I had nothing to do with kind of the on the ground sort of planning or like, thinking about this, all the coming about it. So, when you say that, I'm like, that's, that's interesting. And I've had other people kind of make similar comments. And I'm just like, I wonder like what went through the thought process of like how I was chosen, why I was chosen, like what the backstory was. Is just as simple as, hey, here's a guy who plays piano. We know, we can probably dress it up enough to give the similarities, or was there like more, was there deeper thought into why I was chosen as opposed to someone else? Because I'm clearly not the only, Black piano player in the city, or probably country, right? That could have fit the bill. So, well,
I'm hoping that, someone was at the Rex thinking, we need to get an Oscar Petersen, and all of a sudden, who's that on the piano over there? And, I hope it's something, magical and serendipitous for you to have got the role. But,
yeah.
Well, what's cool is...
So too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but, we're recording this Saturday morning. For me, like, waking up as a kid, Saturday morning cartoons, like, Heritage Minutes were... and turned out to be some of the ways that I actually found out about meaningful Canadian history outside of like the classroom.
burnt toast. I smell burnt toast.
Yeah. The basketball net, like, hey, why don't you cut a hole in the net and then the ball will go through? Like, those heritage moments were kind of integral and funny, and we've seen them parodied with Rob Ford or the Trailer Park
Yeah.
Boys over the years. But I thought that was like, I think that this is something that if the Heritage Minute holds the way that it did from our youth to now, I hope that this is something that, we see continually and is part of television and is part of youth growing up. And I mean, Oscar Petersen was such a huge influence musically for this country. And we have artists like Drake. The Weeknd performed at halftime show. There are massive Canadian artists now, but Oscar Petersen was an incredible trailblazer in many regards.
Yeah. I think before we think about any of the modern day artists, even like the Shania Twains of the world, right? And you got to think about the Glenn Goulds and Oscar Petersens, right? They're the early sort of big cultural icons that have a reach past our borders, and just the people that Oscar Petersen had played with and collaborated with is a big deal. And I appreciate you actually saying that, because I've said that to people before too. It's like a lot of people are like, oh, finally we have artists on a global scale. I'm like, no, man, we've always had artists on a global scale in every genre. And Oscar is one of them. Who knows what happened to the Heritage Minutes, because I'm the same with you. I remember watching them as kids, and then it seemed to just kind of just disappear. So I don't know if this is kind of the beginning of coming back, or what happened, maybe how they were funded, or or whatnot. But it is nice to kind of start being reminded of some of the wonderful achievements of Canadians.
Now, as a pianist, I imagine that you mentioned Glenn Gould as well. I've been, because of COVID, I've been producing a classical radio show on CIUT every Wednesday. And
Cool.
so, since the last time we saw each other in person, I maybe know a little bit more of classical music. But what were these Canadian references? For you, two pianists, Glenn Gould, Oscar Petersen, your upbringing playing the piano, did these artists play a role? And was there a period of time where you started learning their pieces and understanding kind of their legacy in a musical sense universally, not just the fact that they were Canadian?
So with Oscar, for sure. I think Glenn Gould stuff I start to kind of know later. And then also there's kind of history between the two of them as well. Or stories I've heard that, people, because Oscar started playing classical, and, people ask him why he doesn't perform classical. And he's like, well, I want to be the best. Glenn Gould lives down the street, right? Something to that effect. There's stories like that, because I think they're both Montreal kind of born or like raised. And for me, my very first album actually that somebody gave me, a jazz record, was an Oscar Petersen album. It was Oscar Petersen Plays West Side Story, and it's a really cool, neat one. I think my initial kind of understanding of Oscar and just sort of the jazz world as I was kind of being introduced to it, it didn't kind of occur to me that Oscar was Canadian. Like, I didn't see him as, oh, cool, he's a Canadian guy. It's just like, yeah, Oscar, is a part of like the lineage of like jazz piano players you should be listening to, along with like Art Tatum and especially from that era. And then as you come to like Bud Powell and things like that. And so, but Oscar was also, so I started playing classical and played at Royal Conservatory. Finally, later on in my books, as they start to add a list D, I don't know what your musical like training is, but in the classical books, they have like a list A, list C, list A, list B, list C, and like, so the list A is usually kind of is Baroque. So you've got Bach and Handel over there, and then list B is usually sort of Mozart, Beethoven, the people in that sort of the classical area. Then list C is like Debussy, Ravel, like that era. And then they added the list D. So Oscar Petersen appears now in, Royal Conservatory music in the list D portion. So you can actually play that, at your Royal Conservatory exams as his pieces as one of the I guess, what's the word? One of the authorized, like, pieces that are available to you.
Wow, I think that's really cool. That's got to be, especially for someone that kind of was part of the fabric of it, to be a benchmark, to be adjudicated, has got to be such an amazing accomplishment in a sense for an Oscar Petersen, and to kind of instill his legacy on young Canadian musicians in the conservatory, to be playing a homegrown artist's music. I don't want to say incomparable to a Beethoven or a Debussy, but it is great that he is involved in a capacity in becoming, for a conservatory to say, like, kind of check mark.
Yeah.
When you grew up, Thompson, when did you first start playing? Well, even before you started playing an instrument, what was the first music that kind of gripped you? Do you remember a moment where you thought, oh, this is kind of cool?
No, actually, to answer your question, this has come up a few times. Is I actually have no memories of me never being able to play the piano. I started so young that I can't remember a time of like, what was it like to learn the piano? Like, obviously, like, I remember what it's like to get better and like those stages, but there's no concrete or vivid memories of like, hey, you couldn't play the piano at one point and now you can play the piano.
So is it something that, did your parents get you involved in it at an early age, or?
Yeah, I started like very young. I think I was about a little under 6 when I started playing the piano, but I started playing the piano at a music school in Toronto called Dixon Hall, which still exists, still gives lessons now. I think it's now over 40 years old. And they gave subsidized lessons to kids in Regent Park, which is where I grew up when I moved to Canada. And so like I was able to play piano and take lessons for like $2 a lesson through this community music program because they subsidized the lessons so that it was affordable for kids in the neighborhood.
I know that there are a lot of, and I remember even just thinking about like the elementary school playground and where my bedroom window was in my house, I saw the neighborhood piano teacher, and I knew that my friends that took piano hated going. What was the experience like for you? Was this something that you enjoyed right away, or did you get eventually into performing the piano?
I enjoyed it right away. I probably because I wasn't that great of a student. I think for me, the piano was just something else that I did. So it wasn't, there wasn't pressure around it. I don't remember not necessarily getting along with my teachers. I think I pissed a few teachers off, but, it always kind of breaks my heart when I hear people are like, yeah, I didn't like my, piano teacher, or I hated piano growing up. The worst stories are people who are like, yeah, I made it to like grade 8 or like, did their ARCT and I don't touch the piano anymore. And I'm like, oh my God. Cause like, how could you be that proficient on on your instrument, whatever it is, and just not play anymore. But I always enjoyed it. I think from very early on, I also had teachers who didn't mind that I kind of made things up and I don't know if that was like, if it was an encouraging thing or maybe they couldn't be bothered, but I used to play around with the classical music and mainly just because I was a very bad practicer, but I was one of those kids who could go to a lesson, show up at the next lesson, having practiced all week and still sound better than the week before. Or at least I told myself that. Maybe I'm a little wrong with that. But I was fortunate, man. I had I had a couple different teachers. I also had a lot of interest. And so for me, music was just a piece of that. It was like one of the various things that I did. And so it wasn't a big deal, sort of big or small. It was just like another thing that I did.
What were some of the other things that you did?
I loved playing sports. So I always say like my parents were really strict. So I did anything I could do to like get out of the house. So like whether it was like playing Lydia on a sport every single season at school to like the music, I played in like all city bands. So I played the tuba in a brass band for like 10 years.
Wow.
Like I was just like, whatever I could do, I did. Like, there's a program called the Duke of Edinburgh Award. I played on a club soccer team. That was really good. We played in the provincial league. And I just like whatever I could do, I just did it. So, I did. Sorry, go on.
No. You keep going.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say I didn't really think anything of them. Like it was literally my way of like, I don't want to be stuck in the house, and I want to get out and do something.
I mean, it's an amazing way to look at it, and I think that it's so important also to be balanced and to have a lot of other things so that you can just become like a well-rounded individual at that time. But when was the moment for you that the piano took over, or did it ever take over and become like your all-encompassing thing?
Well, I don't know I think I was just like, I played it longer, so I was better at it. But into my early 20s, I was still playing in that brass band. So I was some years I was playing tuba, some years I was playing percussion. I took drum lessons when I was a kid, and could read fairly well enough to play, and play percussion. So whether it's like whatever instrument was, and then clearly, obviously from piano, so I could move along some of the various percussion instruments. I was chatting with my girlfriend Lauren, and I was just thinking about it because I hadn't really decided to kind of go down the music path. I feel like it just sort of I kind of just ended up there, and I was a very bad student in high school. And I remember saying to her a couple of weeks ago, just like, man, if I had gotten better grades in high school, I would have never gone and studied music, like, and which I find very interesting. But of course, in college and university, I was a much better student, did a lot better than I ever did when I was in high school. But for me, it was sort of like, oh yeah, you forgot. Like I hadn't, to your point, because music had been a part of what I'd done for so long, it hadn't even dawned on me that it could be something I continued doing. I just kind of assumed, well, music will always be there. But it was also just kind of this other thing that I did, and I needed to go figure out what I need to do, and then that switched at some point.
Did you go to Humber first?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I went to Humber first.
What was the experience? I've talked to a lot of people. I've done 124 podcasts. I'd say like 50 people have gone to Humber. What was your experience like there?
You know what? This might sound a little surprising, or maybe won't. I don't know who you've spoken to. I wasn't the biggest fan. Like, I thought it was great for my learning. I definitely became like a much better player. But and it may just be part of like maybe the way I learned. I was like, I thought it was okay. And this from like an experience standpoint, like for me, like obviously everyone's different. Like, I think it was great that we played as much as we did. Like, you're always playing there. I enjoyed, like, there were a lot of teachers that I thought were just fantastic and enjoyed studying with them, studying under. And then obviously there are other teachers that I just kind of like, had no time for. But for me, the experience was it was nice to be in a place where I felt like I was finally like succeeding, if that makes sense. Like, I was doing well in school, like, I had fairly good grades, but I was kind of like, I was happy to go to school every day, and I enjoyed that.
It's interesting too, because I think that the course has changed in recent years, and it's funny because it's always like the people that are in rock bands now that loved Humber the most. And it's just, I find it so funny, and I think it's because they had a vision of what they wanted to do, and they utilized like studio time or like a country artist. I remember he utilized his studio time to get the drummer Isaiah Gibbons to do all his bed tracks for his debut album, and all the people that are a little more like, I don't want to peg you into like a jazz or a classical person, but someone that was a lot more perhaps methodical with their instrument and wasn't just excited to like grip it and rip it in a club. It was more tasking of them, I'd say. It seems
Yeah.
like.
Well, I mean, to your point though, like when I was there, the studio didn't exist, right? So like that's an
Okay.
experience that I didn't have, like a chance to go, hey, regardless of what they're teaching. And I think the program from at least what I understand has changed from like sort of a jazz focus to more of a sort of commercial music focus. But I could be wrong. But I think the spectrum of what you do or learn musically is wider. But I had like, it was a, I won't say bittersweet, but like there are definitely parts of it that I thought was fantastic, and then there were definitely other parts that were I thought extremely frustrating, and just and I think, but I don't know if that's like necessarily a Humber thing. I think it might just be an institution and having to learn in our form in such a rigid space where that's not really how the music is created. It's not created within four walls. It's like it's sort of lived. That's I think for all the music, right? It's like even I say about classical music that we have come to kind of think of classical music as this sort of written down music that needs to be interpreted, when the music when it was being created was improvised just the same way jazz is improvised just the same way now. When you're creating pop, you're figuring it out, right? And so those, and I think some of those pieces of defining what the music is before you're able to find what the music is, like, can be tough on somebody who just wants to like explore and see what all the possibilities are.
Yeah, I gotta say, this has been a new revelation for me, learning that Beethoven showed up to perform and maybe the last 16 pages were blank. I had no idea, because I always thought that, looking at things on a very basic level, that a classical musician or a jazz musician or someone that would perform at the level that you, Thompson, could do and blow me away and most people away with just like your musical creativity, but to think about it being looser than it is. Classical music does have that rigid, like it's just rigid. It feels rigid.
Yeah, but that's where I think it's come to, right? But like if you think about any of the forms, or you think of a sonata, other than the structure is different, it's no different than a blues. So people were improvising on a sonata, right? And so if you think of it from that context, that you're mingling, interacting, and it's a social thing. The idea that it would be written down, like it does to me, it doesn't even make sense if we think about how we learn languages, right? We don't learn languages because somebody put a book in front of us. We start to experience it first. Then we can kind of move to kind of conceptualizing it on paper or whatever. But, the easiest way to learn is to be immersed in it, right? And so if you think about that with the music, it doesn't even make sense that, the music would have started at the paper, and that's how you emulate it, right? There's a step before that. And that creative process, I think, was a much more collaborative process in the classical world than people would give it credit for. And so, we look at jazz, it's the same way. So now kind of learning jazz and just being like, well, it needs to be like this, and these are the skills that need to happen over, like, there's something missing. I wouldn't even say authenticity, but there's something missing about the way it has manifested and grown over the years that I feel like isn't always explored or delved into as much when you move it into an institutional structure to teach it.
Well, I think that in the next 5 years, I think that there's going to be a really interesting thing that happens where classical, jazz, and pop artists start to meld together. And I think it's going to happen a lot in like artist housing, and there's a lot of emphasis to get artists together. And I think that it's just, for me, it's been a unique experience learning lately and producing two hosts debating on the same classical piece performed by different orchestras, and the way that they compare and contrast, and they argue and they go on and on about this person over that person. It's like, I would have thought that, and it's amazing to think that this is the way I thought, but just because the notes were written on the paper, that you would have it sound completely different, regardless of, the artistry behind the independent musician performing the piece is a collective.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I would say that stuff has already happened. If you look at, Yo-Yo Ma has some really great albums where he's, I'm trying to think of what the album is. There's one album where he has everybody from like Paquito de Rivera to Joshua Redman to James Taylor on the same album. I forget who else is on that album. And then, if BBC has, or sorry, not BBC, but maybe BBC put it up, but Boston Symphony Orchestra, BSO, they've got concerts with Sting and Chris Botti. I think those collaborations are happening. We don't see them as much kind of necessarily sometimes kind of in the pop world. I feel like you see it sort of in that sort of jazz, sort of that jazz classical-ish world. But those they're happening. They're out there. I mean, if you think of Pavarotti and James Brown, they've got collaborations together. And I think they're great to like just see how the same notes. Something interesting that I've heard people say is that this is the first time we've kind of moved into another century where the tuning hasn't changed, or I forget what the actual word, but like the tonal center hasn't shifted in some way. And so now I'm finding new ways to kind of express with the same tools that the last century had is interesting. So.
Oh, that is cool. I never thought of it. That's very interesting. Now, with regards to after you went to Humber, you moved on to Berkeley.
Yeah,
which was
a few years later.
So you took some time off in between then?
Yeah. I mean, Berkeley honestly wasn't even on my radar. I just was like, cool, let's figure out life. And I was, just playing and working as a musician. And then I got an opportunity to go do a summer program at Berkeley. And, I was down there. I was in Boston for the summer for about 8 weeks and, 5 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. And had a blast. I had like a really great time, and was just sort of enjoying the program in sort of a bite-sized mini way. And then I was just like, you know what, maybe I should try and come here. Like, my thought was just kind of like, you may not be able to stay here and finish a degree because it's like incredibly expensive. But if you could do like a year or two, that would be kind of cool. And so I applied, I'd done a scholarship recital there, gotten some money, and I was like, well, maybe let's apply. And so I applied, got a bit more money, and which was not enough to really go down. But then I was just kind of like, maybe we can just fundraise and, find this money somewhere else. And so, I privately kind of just fundraised. I had some really great mentors who supported me. And I was able to raise the rest of the amount of money to get down there. So
that's incredible. I've been enamored as of late because of artists such as Lewis Cole, J.D. Beck, Domi, like these pop artists. I mean, John Mayer as well, who have all come out of Berkeley. What was the experience like for you to go to a school that's, so musically elusive in a sense?
I would say, so like Berkeley was, I say it's kind of like, it was like Humber on steroids. The pockets were bigger, right? So like every time you have this little niche of people doing stuff here, people doing there, there's like just amplified because there's more people doing it. That experience was great. I say to people kind of my only one regret kind of at Berkeley was that I didn't get to stay longer. Like I rushed through the program. Right. And when I say rushed through the program, my funding, I knew the money would run out. And so I actually didn't take a summer off and just schooled like, fall, winter, summer, just to kind of get through it and see how much I could do. I actually, like I said before, I didn't think I'd actually finish the degree just because I was like, the money will run out before you can do that. My thought was you had 2 years. So that's why I didn't take a summer off, because I was like, maybe we can cram as much as we can in the summer. And somehow I magically was able to get it done. Wow. And so for me, but it was just great because I remember I started playing in like in a rock band, and which is something I would have like never done here in Toronto. Like I would have shied away. And in fact, actually, when I was asked to play in this band, I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. And then they're like, hey, we really need a keyboard. Also, our bass player is like gone. Can you do left-hand bass, whatever? And so I was like, let me just check it out and hang out and see what's going on. And so I went and kind of started hanging out with the guys, and I actually loved their work ethic. Actually, initially it pissed me right off, but and I'll tell you. So what happened was, so I would rehearse with these guys, and we'd literally rehearse one song for 4 hours. And I used to hate it. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Because obviously, you're coming from the jazz world. Like, so many guys want to be like, oh, let's run the tune. Oh, we did it once. Okay, perfect. It's great. That's good. And then you get on stage and then it sounds like ass. You're like, why does it sound like ass? We played it once and it sounded good. And then I play with these guys. We'd rehearse for 4 hours. You go do a show and you're like, okay, that's why you rehearse that long,
Yeah.
And so, trying to take that and really bring that kind of to the jazz world where, because you're improvising, it's loose. Sometimes there's this kind of assumption that you don't need to, necessarily sit with it as long or workshop it as long. And, that part of it, I actually ended up starting to really, really enjoy, because I would just see how it would translate, when we do shows. Plus, it's always nice, doing a show for like a couple hundred people as opposed to like 30, right? So, but yeah, Berkeley was just like, for me, really, really great. I studied sound design actually while I was there. I think if I was going to do it again, I probably wouldn't have done that major. The major was like incredible, but I think just because of the way I exist as a musician right now, I was like, oh, I don't need to do performance. I just need to get better as a player. So that's why I was like, do something else. But I actually think what I should have done was actually done sort of a performance composition major together. But yeah, it was just, I had a blast. Everything about there. I wasn't a big fan of Boston, but schooling was fantastic.
When you were there, did they win any sports championships?
They did. They won. What did they win? They won hockey for sure, and I think they won baseball just as I got there. But I was never around for the parades, which is kind of hilarious. Like,
yeah,
I was just.
It was interesting. I talked to another keyboard player who was there for like when they won the World Series for like the first time, and he said it was insane. But in Boston, they won like in the time that you were there, they won like every championship in every sport multiple times over and over again. So there's a lot of fanfare.
I think the only thing they hadn't won while I was there is, I think it was this sort of Brady drought. So it was like that one period of time, like Brady, the Patriots don't win, but like they're basically they're in that conversation every year, right?
Yeah.
They just hadn't won the Super Bowl. But yes, they won baseball, they won basketball, they won hockey. While I was in school, so, and I wasn't even there for very long, so it's kind of funny that all that stuff seemed to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially going to Boston, Toronto being at that time so championship drought. The reason I bring it up though is because I think that that kind of fanfare creates like a different environment in a city that's translatable to just your experience in a sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So as you're doing the education, I'm glad we talked about these things, because I think that, especially for the younger musicians that listen to this podcast, I think it's important to hear that there is, there's a way to navigate and do all of these, educational things that are there. I was very different in the sense that, a bunch of friends from high school needed a bass player, and then we started a band and we just started doing that. But what I'm curious about too is that you go to Humber, you go to Berkeley, you're a very proficient performer. When you were done with your post-secondary education, did you have a plan as to what you wanted to do once you moved on, in a sense?
No, I had no plan. I wish I had a plan. I might have directed what I did in school differently. I actually moved to Greece after Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did a semester in Berkeley, and I met a girl, and I was like, "Oh man, I really like you." I was like, "When school's done, maybe I should just move to Greece," because I was like, I want to spend some time in Europe, and I was like, "Well, you kind of have a starting point there. Why don't you just see what happens?" So I just school finished, and I went to Greece, and I was there for almost a full year, and it was great. Played with musicians down there, and the only thing about that sort of decision was that I didn't stay in the U.S. So like if I had stayed in the U.S., I would have been able to. I forget what the visa is, but there's a visa I would have been able to kind of like get, which is I guess sort of like an apprentice type visa or something like that for when you go, if you go to school in the States, you got to do it, I believe, within 60 or 90 days, where you have to like register or whatnot, and then you can stay there for the year. But because I was outside of the country, I wasn't able to do that. So I did miss that opportunity to kind of spend some time, whether I stayed in, Boston or went to like a New York or one of the other cities where, a lot of musicians are. But I think, but I still like really appreciate the experience I had in Greece and just kind of doing that. And then I moved back to Toronto. And it's like, all right, let's figure this out and see, let's see what's next. And my thought was just kind of, one of the things I'd been doing before I left was I've always had like lots of piano gigs to do, like a lot of solo stuff, whether it's in restaurants or, private corporate things. And so I kind of just started down that path, had been doing that in teaching. And lately, obviously, I pivoted and have now incorporated some more corporate jobs while I kind of focus on the more artistic part, which has been actually very interesting for me because, initially I never wanted to I wouldn't say never wanted to get a job. I was obviously always working, but I stayed away from sort of that sort of 9 to 5 side. But what I actually found was doing that actually made it easier for me to do more music, or at least do music the way I wanted to. So I found it was actually not until I started actually having a job where I like start recording all, my music and the albums and things like that. And it's kind of made some of those decisions a little easier.
Well, it's interesting too, because if you do preoccupy 8 hours of the day to something else, you have to make those artistic decisions quicker, in a sense. Because you're like, okay, I have X amount of time to execute this artistic prowess. Let's do this. You can't debate on it for a couple of weeks. And I think it's important sometimes. A lot of artists think that having nothing to do except for music is the key to success, when, some of the most prolific artists are usually parents. And it's, it's other things that limit that time. So you just have to be decisive. It's interesting how, because that, growing up, a lot of musicians think that would not be the case. But it turns out that if you have all the time in the world, you usually don't get that much done.
No, it's the saying, if you need something done, ask someone busy. The new company I'm working at, my boss has a saying, he says, fail faster, or like, fail forward, fail faster. And it's just like the idea of like, just make these decisions quickly. Like, they're not all going to be perfect, but at least once you've made them and tried a few things, like it allows you to move on to the next, as opposed to if you like just wait around. And there's a lot of studies on that about producing a greater amount of work will lead you to better results than just working on one particular thing to try and perfect it. And so I think there's an aspect to that, which is now just you just try a bunch of stuff. Like if we think about any of our favorite artists, with very few exceptions, there's a huge catalog of work. There's like no artist who's like been prolific or popular and hugely successful where there isn't just this like a massive body of work. And so I think just thinking of that, it's like to get to some of the really great stuff that you want to get to, but you just got to create, and not so much worry about what comes out, but worry about how much you're able to get out.
The big one for me is Mark Twain. 13% of his work was successful. And I always think about that when I'm working on a song idea or something. And I'm like, is this any good? It's like, just finish it. Who knows? Like, some of the greatest artists, prolific people that we think of hundreds of years later wrote hundreds of things you'll never hear that were terrible. With the Egbo-Egbo Trio, which is such a cool group that pre-pandemic performed at the Rex and all over. What's it like to play and have like a mainstay, a steady in a sense?
Well, you know what? I think for me, like the guys are awesome. So it's great to play with people who like accept your mistakes, because I kind of like I'm all over the place. I don't do this much, but I'd be playing and I'd just change keys for no reason, or change time signatures. Then look at them and be like, why haven't you changed this time signature with me? Kind of. And so, what's cool about the trio is just being able to kind of explore those things and like being all right with just kind of, fumbling through, because, those mistakes are kind of what's going to lead to some new ideas and some cool stuff. But we've been fortunate. I think the last few years, we seem to be kind of like our popularity seems to be growing a little bit. So we're seeing a significant amount of people coming out to shows wherever we're playing, and a lot of just kind of support for what we've been doing, which is great, because I still kind of play and I'm like, people even really like this, man. Like,
well, it's impressive, and you guys are fantastic, and your stage banter is crazy, and and I think that you guys have something that, and what's cool, and we met through Dr. Draw, Eugene Draw, and who plays, a different style of music that most people wouldn't expect to enjoy as much as they are until they see it in person. But, that show that we did January 17th, 2020, like that was kind of the plan was for the year, was to kind of put together a bunch of groups that could really perform throughout the year in different places, different scenes, different scenarios. And what was so amazing about that kind of pilot show, in a sense, was that we put on such an incredible night of different music, but everyone who went and just had such a great time. Your trio can go from being like this small to massive. And I've watched you perform 3 or 4 times between when we met and the pandemic, and it was, I don't know. I think that when we are able to do live shows and stuff like that, I think Egbo-Egbo Trio has. I think that it's your time to shine in the Toronto music scene, and I think people are going to be really looking forward to just new things. I don't think people are so inclined to just go watch a pop band or a rock band play a 25-minute set. I think they want to be taken on a journey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That was a great night. I think too, what was cool for me about that night was just that, people came and stayed, right? Sometimes you sometimes have a couple of different bands, people come for their band and then they're out.
They leave.
But like, people just came and stayed and just hung out. The vibe was cool. It was just chill, right? It was nice to just see that it wasn't like going to see, and this is not a knock on the place or something, but like sometimes you go see a band at the Horseshoe and they're doing that sort of rotation, and it's like, wow, there's so many people here, and then the next band comes, there's nobody here, and the next band comes, there's so many people here, and and it's cool to kind of just have that experience of just mingling. I think those shows are actually, probably some of the more important shows to do. Stuff I didn't do enough when I was younger, which was just like play with other bands, like start to like you combine your fans, like build up your like exponentially build your reach and your to people. And now it's even better because with social media, somebody comes to your show, they weren't expecting, because they're seeing, oh, who's this band, whatever they follow, and then like it starts to like multiply. But yeah, it's great to see that, and for us, it sort of like also just gives different ideas. And I think what was cool for me actually, which is I always forget that, Eugene's an instrumentalist. And so sometimes, I have that insecurity of just kind of being this instrumentalist, and it's like, oh, should I bring more singers on or this, that? And you're like, and then I see you guys doing stuff, filling up the house, and I was like, no, we're just do what you love, stick with what you're doing, and the people who want it, like, will come to it. So.
Well, and Dr. Draw is a violin player, has been on this podcast before, and one of the best things about him is not only is he a fantastic performer and he has a fantastic sound and he's an incredible violin player, my favorite thing about him is he walks into a venue And it could be a shoebox, it could be an amphitheater, and he just goes, okay, great. Let's grab a beer and then okay, let's play. This is going to be amazing. And there's and it's been I'm hesitant to get normal to it because I'm always waiting for him to show up and be like, wait, there's no monitors. Wait, there's no this. There's never an issue, and he's just like, okay, whatever it is, let's go. And it's because he comes from a street performance background, but I think there's a lot to learn from it.
No, sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, that is so cool because it's sort of that. I forget who there's some actor who he has some commencement speech is really popular, and he says something to the effect of just like, he worked at not a McDonald's, but some sort of fast food restaurant, and he's like, never be too good for the job you're doing, or like never not respect what it is. You be thankful for the job, and like I think that's so awesome about him because obviously I've been around that as well, which is that if you're going to get on stage, because I've had we've all been there where you're doing a gig, whatever the reason is, somebody's decided like today I'm not going to show up. I'll be here, but I'm not showing up. And I always think that's a miss because you never know who's in the audience, you never know who's watching, but like whatever. And just to kind of attack every show, every opportunity to kind of do something for someone else, because it's not about you. Like at the end of the day, right? That's what's so cool about that approach. It's like, I can't even perform. I didn't come to perform for myself. I can't perform for other people. So why would I bring, regardless of what's wrong, why would I bring an attitude? And like, man, how many shows have you played where there's something wrong? Like at least half of them, right? So
Well, the best part about Dr. Draw is that as soon as the gig's done, pre-pandemic, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to go grab a bus and go play in Montreal. I'm performing in like 5.5 hours in Montreal somewhere. And, and you're like, okay, are you even going to make it? And then you see him performing with 16 cello players at like a mall opening or a nightclub and it's been inspiring. But I think, the way you and I met is we did a Christmas show. So it would have been Christmas 2019 at Hughes Room. And it was great because we were all just kind of meeting each other. We had dinner together, and then it was like, okay, let's go play on stage for 90 minutes and let's see what happens. And it was so magical in the sense that we all kind of just hoped that we could pull it off, and we did. And it was awesome. But, usually that would include a lot of nervousness and like, is this the right thing to do? Maybe we should rehearse a little bit more. And sometimes you just got to go for it. And that was a fun thing to do. And I hope that when we are able to get together and do some more shows, I think that it would be great if we pick up where we left off in a sense.
Yeah, for sure.
With everything going on, and I know that, which I'll be promoting in the intro and outro, the Egbo-Egbo Trio have some albums that are available everywhere for you to listen to. But Thompson, what's next for you?
New recording, man. Now that I started the pandemic, probably like a lot of people, very inspired. Like, wow, you've got this time on your hands, and then I'm just like, wait a minute, like nothing's changing, and so then that kind of sucked into like, for me, not a depression, but more just like I was just like unproductive. Wasn't doing as much. Now I'm kind of getting back to like, okay, cool. Like what's next? We need to continue to create and continue to create. I'm very nervous about I very much believe in sort of use it or lose it type of thing. And so I'm very concerned that in this time, if I don't respect my instrument, I'm going to get left behind. And so, I'm trying to get back to that. And now it's just like coming up with new ideas, listening to as much music, and figuring out what that next, I guess, offering, if you will be of music that I present. So for me, I'm looking forward to recording. I'm having a baby in April, so I probably won't be able to get into the studio.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, so I probably won't get to the studio until maybe the summer if I plan to, but at least I can get prepared for it. And I've already been getting prepared actually. One thing I did over the pandemic was I've got a ton of voice notes, and I don't know how about you, but sometimes I'll just record. Maybe I'm doing a gig at a restaurant and I'll be fiddling around oh, that kind of sounds neat. Pull my phone out and record it. And so finally I was just like, dude, okay, you need to go back and transcribe everything from your voice notes. Cause like, what's the point of recording them? So I did that last year. And so now, a couple of those ideas are on paper, and it's just sort of let's building on that, and hopefully I'll have more than maybe a couple albums worth, but definitely enough stuff that I'm happy with that I want to take in with me and record. So I've been fortunate. We haven't gotten together in a few weeks, but the trio has found time to get together with each other and play. So that's been great, and I'll probably try and do that again soon to just kind of run through our catalog, and make sure that stuff is fresh.
Amazing! Thank you so much. I hope you have. Hey, congratulations on becoming a parent.
Yeah, it'll be it's a new adventure. Getting
Absolutely.
Old quick.
Amazing. All right, thanks a lot, Thompson.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
You got it. We'll talk to you soon. Keep well. I'd like to thank Thompson for being on the podcast today. Be sure to check out his music. It's available on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you listen to music. He is there. It is absolutely fantastic. And when this pandemic ends, if you're in the general Toronto area, you got to do yourselves a favor and go see him perform at the Rex, which is a great jazz club in downtown Toronto. If you have any questions, comments, or a suggestion for a guest you'd like to hear on a podcast, send us an email, allaboutthesongpodcast@gmail.com. We are on YouTube. If you're listening to this podcast, you should start watching and hit the subscribe button if you already are, the notification button. Leave us a comment at the Sounds Like Songs Network. But we are also on audio, and wherever you listen to your podcasts, we are there, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And wherever you do listen, if you could rate and subscribe, that would be, it would be so great. It would just make my day. So, from Michael Mactinell, which is me, which is not how I'm supposed to say it. I'm supposed to say, for Thompson Egbo-Egbo, I'm Michael Mactinell. Episode 124 of All About the Song is in the books. We'll see you next week.